Just walk away. Just walk away. And there will be an end to the horror.
Hello, my brothers. I am Sirias here, the angry cock that tastes like chicken, and I'm here to deep fry and batter a concept and direction that has been spitting hot oil all over this and our community as of late. I've been stewing in this terrible recipe for some time, but it was Barbar's article that was titled "How White Nationalists Tried to Infiltrate MGTOW." The link will be below. Now, it was this that was the last straw to break the proverbial roasted camel's back. Wait, I'm guessing you didn't know that the Arabs, they love to feast on roasted camel. Yeah, they eat camel. They eat it. They roast it. They boil it. They saute it. They dip it in cheese and all that kind of shit. If you don't believe me, I don't know. I'll put some links below and you can check it out. They basically do like a turducken and what do you call it when they put a turkey and a duck and a chicken all in one and roast it in an oven? They do that with the camel. Nobody believes it, but no, they eat camel. They drink its milk. In fact, some of the Arabs actually drink their piss. But that's another story. I'm digressing. The point is, this, what I'm about to say, needs to be said before it gets way too far out of control. As of late, the media, yes, the same media owned by the same people who spread gynocentric feminist lies, has now grasped at another straw and seemingly convinced so many of us that crazy brown Muslims from the Orient have been shipped into the Western world and are now systematically raping women and children to the point where we as Western men, well, we need to man up, saddle up, and put a stop to this. Well, first of all, this news is bullshit. But like Barbar said in his article that I'm quoting from, he said this.
Are some migrant rapes occurring? Probably, almost certainly. This would be the case whenever you import millions of people from conflict-heavy, theocratic regions. It also doesn't help that the West is involved militarily all over the Middle East either. But when women are lining up to give migrants flowers, maybe, just maybe, these folks telling us that there's some non-stop rape marathon occurring in Europe are doing so because they want to push an agenda.
Yes, it could be an agenda. Did you ever think about that? It's an agenda. And yes, are some migrant rapes happening? Well, I'd say they are, and I say this from experience. When you force two very different cultures to coexist in the same place without allowing for such a thing to happen naturally, you will come up with very disastrous results. One only needs to look back in time at forced or coerced migration of white Europeans and African blacks into the Americas to see proof of this. I'm pretty sure every one of you learned about this in your little high schools. Any asshole that says shoving displaced migrants into different cultures is a good thing, well, they have the intelligence of basically a social media pixel on a computer screen. Now, let me give you some anecdotal evidence of what I'm trying to say to you now. Years ago, when I first moved to Indonesia, I met and eventually dated this half Colombian, half English woman who was about 3 years my junior. I mean, she was very attractive, and if looking at her through brown male Asian eyes, she was white-skinned and ripe for the pickings. She herself was not a stranger to this country, so she knew what her anatomy brought upon herself by living here. One day, back in about 2004, her and I decided to take advantage of the new public transit system that had just been completed in Jakarta called the busway. We went down to the closest station to buy a ticket to anywhere and see what this new transit system was all about. When we arrived, the station was a bloody madhouse. There were people packed shoulder to shoulder, lining up to buy a ticket. we bought our pass and shoved our way into the masses. And I want you to imagine a queue. Yes, just a queue of people that was about 15 people wide and 200 people long. And there was no organization. And as we stood in this mass of sweaty brown people on a hot Jakartan day, my girlfriend, who was standing right beside me at the time, suddenly screamed, "Hey, somebody just grabbed my ass!" Yes, somebody had grabbed her ass. Now I looked around and laughed. In this mass of brown Indonesians, obviously and predictably, some man couldn't control himself when a tall, white-skinned woman with a supple ass wearing tight jeans stood directly adjacent to him in a large crowd. And could anything less be expected? Both my girlfriend and I knew this was inevitable and simply laughed it off. After all, being a white minority in a brown country and crying sexual assault, well, that doesn't get you anywhere. The point is, men from Muslim countries or any other brown Eastern country who have no experience with white women besides the porno and Hollywood films they see on their little tiny TVs, they simply don't know how to act when around these tall, white-skinned goddesses. There's no off switch between their groping hands and a supple white ass, and this is really just laughable and mostly innocent. Hardly a rape waiting to happen. My girlfriend and I laughed about the experience, and we went on with our day. But this anecdotal story is only the beginning of what I have to say. The next point is to say to you, my brothers, that there is no uncontrollable rapes happening to Western women by these so-called immigrants. Yes, they are from different cultures, and yes, they may behave inappropriately according to our standards, but the degree to which these events are happening, they're just being manipulated by the media in order to get you, yes, you, the masculine Western male who has come this far in understanding his true potential, to once again bow down and place his head on a block, all in the name of gynocentrism. And I pity you who do not see this obvious ruse. The only conspiracy happening here is the one that sedates your mind into once again becoming completely subservient to the gynocracy of the world we live in. I shudder to think about how many of my brothers being called to violent arms against men of different cultures simply because they have been sold the time-honored lie that damsels are in distress. Quoting again from Barbar's article, this is what he said.
Back then, I was still thinking that feminism was the main culprit, but I was on to something. I knew that there was something more than feminism at play. I knew that the answer lied in the actual instinctual fabric of the human animal, and I knew that because such an explanation for what we perceive as the destructive effects of feminism would be highly controversial, it would be ultimately rejected by the seething hordes of eager white knights queuing up for a whiff of the latest manosphere groupie's crotch.
And you can compare that quote to that famous MGTOW saying. I don't know where it came from. Maybe it was Stardust. Maybe it was Barbar. I don't know. But it goes something like this. Every man is one blowjob away from going back to the blue pill. Or something to that effect. So what is it, gentlemen? Are you satisfied with your evil immigrant blowjob? Did it make you come in shades of stars and stripes to the point where you're ready to forget everything you learned in order to protect the woman's from the evil brown rapists? Now, to hammer home the real point of this video, I want to present to you, the listener, a simple test or a quiz. A test or quiz to help you better understand your own cognitive dissonance or your lack of it.
This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the emergency broadcast system. This is only a test.
And to do this, I'm going to read to you an article I found from an Islamic Indonesian website. The link will be below. This article is titled, Astaghfirullah, inilah 26 dosa istri terhadap suami nomor 17 sering dilakukan. The translation, oh my God, here are 26 common sins a wife will commit against her husband. Number 17 is the most common. Yes, it is a typical clickbait title for a typical ignorant audience. Only this is for a culture that is not white or Western. Oh, and by the way, it's up to you to decide how you want to define the word sin. But other than that, let us continue. So before I read this article, I want you, my typical Western audience of men, to really think about how much you like or dislike Islam and or the cultures this religion comes from. I want you to also think hard about what your own beliefs are when it comes to how men and women should interact and in what ways you think best represent your ideal of these man-woman relations. And this is important, so I'm going to repeat it. Please, those of you listening, again, think very hard about how much you either like or dislike Islam and or the cultures this religion comes from. And I want you to also think hard about what your own beliefs are when it comes to how men and women should interact and in what ways you think best represent your ideal of these man-woman relations. So let's just ponder on that for a moment. I'm going to give you a moment, so if you're ready, let's ponder. Okay, let's see how much you relate to these points made in the name of Islam and brown Eastern cultures and how much you do not. Remember, this is just a clickbait countdown so often found in social media. But in this case, it's coming from a culture that's not yours. Hopefully, you can relate. And as a side note, I want you to understand that these points, in many ways, they do not represent Islam as a religion precisely, but more so represent a combination of the cultures that have adopted that faith. And if this is confusing to you, well, then I suggest maybe you send me a message, a private message maybe, with any questions you have in order to clear up any misunderstandings that you might have, because I'm not going to spend the time now to try and explain to you the difference between religion and culture and race, because these things are not the fucking same. Now I'm going to explain to you what I'm going to do here with this sort of quiz or survey or test, and it's all based on this article that I'm going to read to you. This article with the 26 points that are talking about what women do to sin against their men, all based on the culture and religion and race of this part of the world. Now, this is how it works. For every point that I make, that I read off from this list, and you agree with, give yourself 2 points. Mark 2 points down for yourself. And for every point that I make that you don't agree with, but you think that it might be good if it became a social norm in your own culture, give yourself 1 point. That is, maybe you don't really agree with it, you're kind of on the fence, but you're thinking, wow, this might actually help our situation out. Yes, give yourself 1 point. But for every point I make from this list that you utterly disagree with, give yourself no points. And then after it's all said and done, add up your score. And then I will explain the scoring afterwards. Just add it up, put down a number, and we'll decide where you stand at the end. Now, without further ado, let us begin with this list of top sins, top 26 sins committed by wives toward their husbands according to this Eastern culture of brown people with heavy Islamic influence.
Point number 1. Berlebihan dan menuntut kesempurnaan.
Translation, she excessively demands perfection from you. So women demanding perfection from their husbands all the time in order to make them happy is a sin that they should not commit according to these cultures. Now, I'm sure this sounds very familiar. For example, "What have you done for me lately?" your wife says. "What have you done to go out of your way to make sure your wife is happy and that you are perfect in her eyes?" Now, this does not sound familiar with the top 10 countdowns you get from the feminist websites on the top 10 things men can do to make sure that their wives are happy and therefore their marriage will last. If you agree with this, give yourself 2 points. If you kind of disagree, 1 point. If you completely disagree, 0 points. Let's move on to the next.
Point number 2, kurang mempercantikkan diri di hadapan suami.
Translation, she doesn't try to look her best when she is in your company. Now, does your wife or girlfriend look like shit all the time in front of you and your friends? Well, this is a big no-no according to these apparently rabid immigrants and people from that different culture. Now, do you think that a woman should look good for you and look good for you when you are out in public? Well, do you agree or disagree? If you completely agree, 2 points. Partially agree, 1. If you completely disagree, 0. Let's move on.
Point number 3, kurang memperhatikan orang tua suami.
Translation, she doesn't respect her husband's parents. Your wife absolutely may not disrespect your parents as the husband. And if she does this, it is a big sin according to these so-called rapist cultures. But I guess according to us, white women get a free pass on this one, don't they? Again, agree, slightly agree, or disagree. Score your points. Next one.
Point number 4, menyebarkan masalah rumah tangga kepada orang lain.
Translation, your wife constantly complains about personal or family issues with other people. Now, is this familiar to you? Wives regularly bad-mouthing their husbands and their personal lives to friends and relatives and co-workers. Well, this is a big sin also for these apparent brown rapists. But how do you feel about it? Does this happen? Do you experience it happen? Have you experienced it happen to your friends where your wives open their mouths and actually cause harm to not only relationships between you and your friends, but also your co-workers and the jobs that you have? Well, up to you. Agree or disagree?
Point number 5, kurang memperhatikan posisi dan status sosial suami.
Translation, she does not regard and disrespects her husband's position and social status. Now, I wonder how many Western women have used this power of gyno to belittle their husbands, making them feel of no worth for what they actually produce and provide for their family and society. Please say it ain't so. Women in society at large can't possibly be accountable for tearing men down for the work they do. Well, guess what? This is also a very big sin among these Oriental Muslims. You know, the ones you love to hate. So, keep up adding your scores. Where are you at? Now let's move on to the next point.
Point number 6, membebani suami dengan banyak tuntutan.
Translation, she burdens her husband with extraordinary demands. Yes, this is another sin for these people, burdening their husband with extraordinary demands. But this must not happen among our white nationalist cultures, does it? Surely our women don't demand so much of us men. Oh wait, except when they ask us to protect them, these women, from patriarchal rape monsters from different cultures because, you know, they don't want to admit that they've kept our necks shoved under a bus for the last 100 plus years. No. And remember, this is a sin for those people. So, mark your scores, let's move on.
Point number 7, mengungkit-ungkit kebaikan kepada suami.
Translation, she feigns kindness to her husband for favors. Well, I never knew a white woman to lie or cock tease her husband to get what she wanted. Have you? Well, if you have, well, that too is a big sin according to these out-of-control brown rapists. These people you love to hate, they can't figure out why you would allow a woman to completely feign love for you to get favors out of you. Wait a second, does that mean that she sucks your cock for money, or she sends you a fucking tit pic so that maybe you'll buy her a plane ticket to your hometown or whatever? You know what I'm saying. feigning kindness for her husband's favors, and for any man's favors. This is what women do and what they're very good at, and this is a big sin. Now, add your score again, and let's move on.
Point number 8. Banyak berkeluh kesah dan kurang bersyukur.
Translation: your wife often complains, rarely grateful. I think we call this typical wife behavior in the Western world, don't we? Maybe it's time to rethink ways on making ungrateful bitches learn some respect. What do you think? Or do you think we should pay another child support check just so you can see your own kid for 3 hours on the weekend? Again, big sin, people. Ungrateful wives and often complaining. Let's move on.
Point number 9. Memasukkan orang yang tidak diizinkan suami ke dalam rumahnya.
Translation: she allows people into your house without your permission. Now, this one might sound a little harsh, Well, she lives in the house too, and just because she allows people in without my permission, that shouldn't be bad. But, oh, wait a second. It's probably not your house, actually, is it? Even though you paid for it? Because guess what? Even though you paid for it, all you have to do is upset her, and then the next thing you know, it's not your house anymore, even though you did pay for it. Oh, but guess what again? These brown intruders, these male brown intruders, these refugees coming into these Western countries, guess what? Back home where they live, their house is theirs. It is theirs, and it belongs to them. And if the woman behaves in these fashions that I'm counting down now, well, she doesn't have a chance at having a part of it. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. Do you understand? This is how they think, so how do you think? Add your scores up and let's move on.
Point number 10. Kurang membantu suami dalam kebajikan dan ketakwaan.
Translation: she doesn't assist her husband in good and pious deeds. Now, I'm not going to be the judge of your deeds, but how many of your wives or girlfriends are supporting when you try to help out your best male friend who, let's say, was maybe kicked out of his own house because his own wife or girlfriend didn't want him there, and you wanted him to sleep on your couch for a few nights? Did she help you with that? Was she supportive of that? Think about it. I doubt it happens very often. You see, there's no bro code in Gynoville. And guess what again? A lot of these brown intruders, they don't have the same gyno code that we do. They think differently. So, add up your scores and let's move on.
Point number 11. Bersikap nusyus terhadap suami.
Translation: she has an attitude of rebelliousness against her husband. Well, according to this tradition, your wife or girlfriend should not willfully seek to rebel against your will. Now, is this patriarchal domination or just a warning about female behavior? Well, you decide.
Point number 12. Membuat suami risau dengan banyak menjalin hubungan.
Translation: she constantly worries her husband with unimportant concerns. Well, gossip and distractions are a commonplace occurrence when dealing with women in our lives from day to day, are they not? And this just sounds like common sense advice to me. What do you think? Do you agree, slightly agree, or disagree?
Point number 13. Lalai dalam melayani suami.
Translation: she is negligent when it comes to providing for her husband. Well, as men in our cultures are absolutely considered the providers, where and when do we see the women doing the same or the equivalent? And perhaps this is a question you should ask yourself, because this is obviously a question that the men that you are hating have already asked themselves and answered. They don't put up with it. For them, it is a sin.
Point number 14. Menolak ajakan suami berhubungan badan.
This is a good one. The translation is, she refuses her husband sexual intimacy. Oh, this never happens where we come from. I suppose the term "I have a headache" is simply a patriarchal myth. In other words, to these people, it is a sin for a woman to deny her husband sexual intercourse and intimacy. But where we come from, that's her right, and if we have anything to say about it, we're a bunch of assholes. maybe we should, instead of fighting these people, we should sit down for a coffee and talk to them about what they understand. Anyway, moving on, don't forget to count your points.
Point number 15. Menaati suami dalam kemaksiatan kepada Allah.
Translated, she follows her husband in disobedience to God. Now, this one is interesting because it is very focused on religion and God. But if you listen to what it's saying, it's basically saying that as a man, you lose either way. If you go against God and your wife happens to follow you in your endeavors, then her following you is still counted as your sin. In other words, if you fuck up, it's your problem. If your wife fucks up, it's also your problem. What the fuck? This is what these people believe. But, I thought that these brown Eastern Muslims were manly and patriarchal, and they controlled everything. That's not true. In fact, they are burdened with the responsibility of their wives' behavior, and this is so much in line with how men were with their wives before the inset of women voting, or the suffragettes. Before the suffragettes, a man could be beaten in public for his wife's actions. And this is how these brown men think. Do you understand? These brown men are coming to your land and seeing these whores running around, drinking their asses off, shoving their pussies in their faces. That's how they think. So let's move on to the next one. And don't forget to count your scores.
Point number 16. Buruknya perilaku istri bila suami berpoligami.
Translation: if the wife behaves poorly towards her husband's agreed upon polygamy. Yes, my brothers, polygamy does exist in many of these Islamic Eastern cultures, but there is a condition. It only can exist if the first wife that he was married to agrees to it. That is, the first wife allows him to take on a second wife. You've heard me right, and if you don't believe me, why don't you, instead of hating these people, sit down for a coffee with them and ask them, because they will tell you the same thing. So this point is basically saying if the first wife starts creating problems with the husband after they've both agreed on polygamy, then that is a sin. Now again, I have to ask my white Western male listeners, when was the last time that your girlfriend or wife might have caught you even looking at another woman and caused problems, even though there was no agreement made upon it? Think about it. Really think about it. Now, let's move on to the next point and keep adding up your fucking scores.
Point number 17. Keluar dari rumah tanpa izin suami.
Translation: she leaves the house without her husband's permission. Well, if it's your house and her actions reflect on you in society, wouldn't you want this to be enforced? If she could actually leave the house, cause a shitstorm, and have all that crap come back to you, wouldn't you want to have some kind of control on her comings and goings? Because that's what these people had to live with in their culture, okay? So you better understand where they're coming from. So just understand this: your whorish women in your culture are basically bending over backwards to allow them in with welcome signs, and then turning around, crying rape, and asking you to beat the shit out of them. When these men are like, why the fuck aren't your women back in your house? Think about it, and let's move on to the next one, and don't forget to count up your scores.
Point number 18. Istri yang ikhtilah dan tabaruj di hadapan kaum laki-laki.
Translation: your wife intermingles with and displays her beauty or nakedness openly in front of other men. I wonder how much of this cultural conflict affects the minds of those brown immigrants that are completely caught off guard by these white, Western, feminist women in our countries who brazenly walk around the streets with their tits hanging out, all in the name of power for them. Yes, to them, this is fucking unbelievable. How could a woman fucking do this. Their women don't. Their women can't, and they don't. So when they see it, they don't know how to deal with it. So you're going to have conflict. But I'll tell you this, they're not all fucking raping them. This is simply culture against culture, and you're being manipulated by the politics that are in control of both of them. And they're doing it through the wiles of women. Wake up, MGTOW. Are you getting the picture? Fox in the hen house, my brothers, and you raised the hens. The hens are crowing, and the real cocks that are coming over here are wondering why your hens are crowing, because it causes nothing but trouble. So, add up your scores and let's move on.
Point number 19. Cemburu berlebihan terhadap suami.
Translation, she is excessively jealous towards her husband. Well, this never happens in our white privileged country of white privileged women, does it? Especially not to the degree in which they cut off penises with impunity, right? Now, never here. We are perfect and so are our women. We must protect our women from the evil brown men. Wake up, brothers. Count your scores. We're moving on.
Point number 20. Kurang perhatian terhadap keadaan dan perasaan suami.
Translation, she is not attentive of the feelings and condition of her husband. How does this sound? Is this familiar? From the husband to the wife. What would you like to do tonight, dear? What would you like to eat? Where would you like to go? What's that? What did you say? How can I make you happy? Would you like to meet with your friends? Not a fucking chance. Oh, Western women are never demanding. And, oh, by the way, 70% of divorces by women, and the number one cause because she feels her husband's not paying attention to her? Come on, guys. Let's wake up. This is again a sin to these people. A woman is not allowed to simply divorce a man because he's not paying attention to her, and so vice versa. But in our world, it's not like that. In other words, a man is held responsible for the feelings of the woman. That does not exist in the brown culture that you dislike. It doesn't exist. Get to know them. Get to understand you're being manipulated. Alright? Again, this is a sin. Do you agree with it or not? Add up your scores and let's move on to the next point.
Point number 21. Lalai dalam mendidik anak-anak.
Translation, she fails to educate your children. Now this one is also a double-edged sword. At once, it is selling us the idea that women are absolutely needed to educate our children. But at the same time, it sins them for not fulfilling the role. Now, I don't disagree with this or agree with it. I'm on the fence, really, because I say take them, the women and wives, out of the equation altogether. Don't allow women to educate the children. But according to this culture, this brown men culture, this rapist immigrant culture that you despise so much, the women are responsible to some degree for educating the children that they bear. And if they don't, they are considered sinners. Okay? Just so you know, let's keep moving on. Count your scores.
Point number 22. Istri mendeskripsikan seorang perempuan kepada suami.
In other words, it translates as the wife is loose-lipped about other men or women's character to you, and vice versa. So what it's basically saying is she's gossiping to you about other men and women and their relationships, which in turn causes you more problems in your personal life as you're trying to be the head of a family. This is a sin to these foreigners. They do not consider this a good character or quality of women. Now, do we have an agreement between us and them, us and our enemies, that women are loose-lipped and gossip about everything? And are we in agreement that everything they gossip about does nothing but cause problems? So why don't we sit down, have a coffee, and forget about killing each other and start putting things right? Next point, count your score.
Point number 23. menyebarluaskan rahasia tempat tidur.
Translation, she likes to gossip about the privacy in your bedroom. Oh, I love this one. I love it because I don't think there's a woman alive on the planet that can stop herself, close her lips from committing this sin. Yes, this sin that the brown men think women sin as regularly. Remember, it's a top list of women's sins according to their culture. Now, I know that the popular trope is that men are the ones that fuck and brag about it, but if you are honest like I am, and you know your best friends, you know that men rarely fuck and talk about it. Occasionally it might come up, but when I think about the women I've been intimate with or just been good friends with, I can't count on my fingers and toes how many times I have heard them just sit and gossip about the men they fucked. It is unbelievable. They are twisting the truth and turning our good nature upside down and trying to apply it to themselves, because this is the laziness of women. This is the laziness of women. And guess what? The brown men that you hate, they understand this, and they know that if a woman likes to do that, it is considered a sin, and all our women in our countries do it. So let's move on and see what the next point is. Add your scores.
Point number 24. Kurang setia terhadap suami.
Translation, she is unfaithful to her husband. Now, do I really need to explain this one? That it's a sin for the wife to be unfaithful to the husband? I mean, let's really understand our predicament here in the West and try to understand the predicament there in the so-called East. How many times have you heard it? Well, apparently in their countries, in the brown person's countries, if the woman commits adultery, it is a horrible sin. And I agree that we believe the same, but guess what? The punishment is different, because for them the punishment might be severe to what we say. You might hear they get stoned, they get this and they get that. But trust me, most of that is media bullshit. But trust me, they do lose a lot if they commit that particular sin. However, in the West, they get nothing. In fact, they blame it on us, and they get away with it to do it again. Remember, the brown guys that you hate, that you think are over here raping our women, they're the ones that are trying to put women in their place for cheating. You're the guy that's allowing the woman to cheat and saying, oh, well, we forgive you. Move on, answer the question, add up your score.
Point number 25. Menggugat kepimpinan suami.
The translation, she challenges and discredits the husband's role as leader of the family. Now, I know none of you desire any authority as the family head, correct? You being the forge-ahead white men, you don't desire an authority, do you, MGTOW men? After all, we're all equal, right? We're all equal. Egalitarians, that's what we want to be. Look what that attitude has led us to in this modern gynocracy. Come on, open your eyes, man. You giving up your leadership role has caused this bullshit. What I'm trying to tell to you, and I know I might be preaching to the choir of most of you men there, is that the people that you despise, that you believe, or no, not that you believe, but have been sold to believe, that are raping your women so that you could go to war with them, they know this. They know that they are the head of the family. And if they are not the head of the family, they know that there's something wrong. Guess what? I think you motherfuckers are jealous. You're jealous that they control their women and are fucking yours, and there's nothing you can do about it. Wake up, my friends! Let's move on to the next point. Add up your scores.
Point number 26 and the final point. Kurangnya ketakwaan kepada Allah berpisah dari suami.
Translation, she lacks devotion with God after she splits with her husband. Or my version of the translation is, she divorces you and takes a long trip on the cock carousel? Well, again, I don't think I need to explain this one. In fact, most of us have to sit and watch this happen while our masters applaud and hand over our money, wealth, and children to our white whore overlords. Oh, but I forgot, you still need to protect them from these crazy brown Easterners, right? Right? Come on. We are talking about a sin, according to them, that says, if she leaves you, splits up with you, and turns into a cock carousel rider, well then she's a horrible person, and you should treat her as such. In the meantime, we are victims of being tied down and watching that happen every day of our lives, and not only that, having them take control of our children. And this is the point. The reason why a woman who, after she splits from her husband, for whatever reasons, turns into a cock whore, she needs to be put in her place and humiliated. Guess what? She's going to raise your son. She's going to raise your daughter. And guess how she's going to raise them? You see, these people had a culture that they understood as far as men and women related. That's how they think. They don't understand how the fuck you can put up with this shit. And when they come to your country, and I'm not saying they came there because they had a plane ticket for a holiday. No, these people are being forced to come here. So don't blame them. They're being forced by your fucking governments to come here and put up with the damage caused by the women that you've raised. So come on, get over your bullshit. Let's take these brothers aside, take them out for a coffee, and talk to them. Because that's the only thing that's going to make fucking sense. Otherwise, guess what? Well, you know what? I'm going to save that little tidbit for the end of this episode. But regardless, that's the last of these points. And I'm going to move on from that and go into the closing arguments and points of this small little quiz essay rant. Okay? So for those of you who made it through this entire rant, here is how my simple trick works. For every point made by this Indonesian website that I've just read to you, you know, the one with the heavy Islamic influence, give yourself 2 points.
By the way, no brown Muslim Indonesians or pure white women were raped or harmed during this recording.
Then give yourself 1 point for all the mentions you disagreed with initially, but deep down would like to see as a reality in your own culture. In other words, the things you partially agreed with. And finally, give yourself a score of 0 points for each comment you completely disagreed with. Then take a moment and add up your score. So now I'm going to give you that moment. Here is your moment. Take it and add up your score starting now. Now, if you scored a 30 or above, you are a brown Eastern rapist apologist, and your own culture wants nothing to do with you. So you might as well just get over with it and join the enemy, slash your wrists, blow yourself up, paint your skin black, and get down with the boogie. Now, if you scored between a 15 and 29, well, you're still sitting on the fence. Your asshole is a little uncomfortable, but there you are on the fence, and you're just one blowjob away from a hooded Muslim whore jerking you back to the dark side of the blue pill. And if you scored between 5 and 14, then congratulations, my brother. You are a true man and patriot as defined by your vagina overlords. There ain't no pussy ever gonna bring you down or put you in distress as long as you are around. But if you scored below a 5, well, I've heard they have 69 white feminist virgins lined up at the pearly gates of Gyno heaven waiting for you with wet spots and sweet nothings, ready to award you with the white knight badge you've always wanted. Well, either that or Onision and Steve Chives will not only butt fuck you for eternity, but also read to you their bedtime stories while you pass out between cum shots on your face. So, what score did you get, ladies and gentlemen? Share it in the comments. Let us know. Well, that's it for me. And remember, be safe, be wise, and be MGTOW.
Sirias, Drive Sessions number 22. Back from India. Got something to say? Shed Sessions 22, Chris Sirias, no woman brings him down.